Thanks for joining us today for Front Porch Conversations at Advent Christian Village. Today my guest is Shirley Minster. Shirley, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I think we're going to have fun today.
I hope so.
Shirley, would you let our viewers know where you were, a little bit about your early life, where you were born and where you grew up?
Okay. I was born in Portland, Maine in 1953. So growing up, I'm still doing that. But I grew up in Portland, a little bit of time in South Portland, but basically lived in Portland. And just had a normal childhood. So.
What were some special memories from that time?
Oh my. I'd go out with my friend Debbie. We'd go out in the woods. I used to climb the pine tree, which was right beside my kitchen, my parents' kitchen, and my mom would be in the kitchen baking, and she'd look out the window up a story, and there I was waving at her. So that was fun.
Did she panic?
Yes, she did. And then she'd roll her eyes and, realizing I'd have pitch all over me when I got down out of the tree. But we spent a lot of time outside. We'd go to my grandfather's farm and run around in the woods. We'd look at the cows, the chickens, the pigs, just a normal childhood. So it was fun.
And what about your education? Education years and.
Oh yes, I had a weird education at the beginning because of our moves. I spent kindergarten through second grade in one elementary school in Portland, and then we moved just a few streets over, so I had to switch to a different school for third and fourth grade, and then because that's as far as that school went, then I was had to transfer back to the original school, which I think was not a good thing because I got to know one group of kids and then get to know another group of kids and then go back to the others. And that I found very difficult. But one of the things that I did, which you would never be allowed to do nowadays, is I had special permission to walk in fourth grade about a mile during the school day from the second school I attended to the first school for violin lessons and then walk back. You would no more be able to do that. And I hated junior high school, hated it with a passion. And I was so happy when I went to Deering High School in Portland and graduated in '72. I was involved with band, jazz band, orchestra. I was the concertmaster of Portland Junior Symphony, which is the children's orchestra, and just had a lot of freedom at that time. Of course, this was in the late '60s, early '70s, so there was a lot of freedom in high schools then.
Yes, there was.
So,
what instrument besides the violin do you play?
alto sax, and I played violin for years and years and years. That was my major instrument in college. And alto sax I played for, I'm going to say 18 years. And when I was a junior in high school, my parents bit the bullet and paid for me to have piano and organ lessons as well, because my intention was to go to college for music. So it made sense.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have two older sisters. Sally's the oldest, and Susan is the middle child, and I'm the baby. I always tell them I was just perfect, and they roll their eyes and say, yeah, right. And I say, well, I just was. That's all there is to
And
it.
that's why there are no more in our family. They had the perfect one, right?
That's right. They stopped right there.
Gosh. So you talked about going to college. Where did you go?
When I was in the summer after ninth grade, I was at, or was it eighth? It might have been eighth grade. I was at University of Maine, Orono for a special music camp, and we were allowed to take one course. So I started my college career then. And then a couple of years later, I was in the National Youth Symphony in DC and received credit from American University. But the normal experience was at University of Southern Maine. And I started out there. I had 3 years in the music program, the music education program, but I didn't want to do the recital. It freaked me right out, knowing I was going to do that my senior year, where everything had to be memorized. I have a lousy memory, so I took 2 years off and went back in elementary education, and I felt much more comfortable with that. And then when it was time to renew my license, I decided, well, you might as well make it count towards something. So I did my master's program in counselor education at the same school, University of Southern Maine.
So you were Maine educated.
I was Maine educated, yes.
And then, did you go to work after completing college?
I did. My first teaching job was at Greater Portland Christian School, which at that time was in Portland. It's now in South Portland. And I was there for a total of 8 years, teaching the lower elementary grades. And Pat Penny was a co-teacher with me. So, you know.
Another tie here at Advent Christian Village.
That's right.
That was Ray's wife. Right?
That's right. Mm-hmm. And and I was also doing tutoring on the side. And I was also working with homeschooling families at that point.
Did you use music a lot?
Yes, I did. I used it in church. When Dawn was co-pastoring in Advent Christian Church, I was the organist there. And of course in the classroom, you're always using music. So I did just a little bit of private teaching, but I didn't like that for music. Tutoring kids in different subjects, not a problem. But I didn't, it wasn't my favorite thing I felt like I was putting them on the spot for private lessons, because I knew that a goodly portion do not practice. And I didn't like putting them on the spot.
Well, you mentioned you had some interesting jobs before you graduated from college. Any of those you want to share?
Sure. I graded hot dogs. I worked at Jordan's Meats, which was a company in Portland. And the job was to determine what size the hot dogs were, if they were size 8, size 10, size 12, and put them in the right boxes. I gained strong muscles from that, and of course playing violin, you have stronger muscles anyway. But we had to lift metal, steel bars that had strings of hot dogs on them, and you had to take them off the rack, tip it, and then put the pole back on. So that was one. I also...
Do you still grade hot dogs?
No, you can't get red hot dogs down here. I have that against Florida.
And what kind is that?
Red hot dogs. They are red, not brown, and they snap when you bite into them. So I do miss them. Probably more than missing lobster.
Oh my goodness.
I know, that's very sad. I also did typing for the U.S. Agriculture Department a couple of summers in the blueberry, in a blueberry plant.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a couple of the jobs I've had.
Well, I hope one day soon you get a red hot dog.
I do too. Please, somebody send me red hot dogs.
Well, we have a number of people visiting Maine this summer from here. Maybe you can get some smuggled home.
Yeah, well, that's my hope. I would love that.
Well, a minute ago you mentioned the name Don. Who's Don?
Don was my husband, and we were married for 40 years. I met Don, I would say he was probably a believer for maybe 3 years before I met him. And there used to be a large Christian adult gathering in downtown Portland in an apartment. Actually took up 2 floors of the apartment. There were sometimes up to 100 young people there. And I was introduced to him and thought, my word, he's tall. And he, red hair, that was his nickname, was Red. But we met in May of '72, got engaged that August, and married the following June. So, and he went on to, he became a pastor in the AC denomination through independent study. It was one of the first studies that they had done, that they allowed him to do, and it had an 8 to 10 hour oral test at the end, and it was quite an accomplishment. I was so proud of him. And before we were married, and then after we were married, we were part of a Karate for Christ team. And we traveled around New England, and we went a little ways into Canada, and with a group of other adults. And our primary focus was on teenagers, to introduce them to the Lord. And we used realistic situations that involved karate, because we knew that that would be something that would attract, especially the guys, you know, so that was fun.
Did you learn karate?
I had learned karate. Don had his black belt, and I took karate classes at the University of Southern Maine, and was trained by Don, and he co-led the group. So we would practice, after we were married, we would practice in our backyard, and our neighbors would look as I'm standing there very straight, because of course you can't move, and he would do some flying leaps, and his foot would go right by my nose, and we'd see people looking out their window thinking, what is he doing? But you had to practice someplace. So that's where we did it.
They never called the police to come check on you?
No. No, because we were, after he would get done doing like a flying roundhouse, then we'd be laughing. So they knew it was okay.
Well, it's good to bring laughter and excitement to wherever you go, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. I went through a time in my life where I didn't realize it until after the fact, but it just seemed like life was pretty blah. And Don was at work. He was working a second shift in B&M Baked Beans Company. And I was home, and I turned on, I can't remember which show, the 700 Club maybe. And there was a pastor talking, he was being interviewed, and he was going through a time where he was very depressed. And he said the Lord woke him up one night and he just laughed and laughed and laughed. And he calls it a case of the holy giggles. And I realized it had been a long time since I'd laughed. And so I determined at that point that I was going to look every day for something funny, because we're all pretty weird. and there's always something that we can laugh at, whether it's animals or people and self.
I was going to add that one for me.
Yes, I do laugh at myself quite often.
During your marriage, what were some of the things you did together? You mentioned a couple already.
We like to cook together and try new things. We like to visit with friends. We like to study the Bible together. We like to talk with brothers and sisters in the Lord about the Bible. We also ministered to folks who were believers but were who were having heavy battles. It wasn't uncommon for Dawn to receive a phone call from what's called P6, which is a Maine Medical Center, and it's a quote lockdown unit where folks who they're not safe on the road. There are emotional things going on, and he would get a call to go in there to meet with specific people. They had normal questions, but the medical team didn't know how to answer them. Well, it's because they were questions about God, and they just couldn't answer them. So when he would go in there, even though we were apart, he knew I was praying at home.
And talk a little bit more about your teaching career and where that led you.
Boy, God led me all over the place. And it's so important to move when God says move. When he tells you to do something, do it. Early in my teaching career, I believed the premise that parents can teach their children up until 6, and then it's my job to take over.
6 years of age?
Yes, because that's kindergarten.
I didn't know if you meant 6th grade.
Oh, no. You can have them when they're younger, but then it's my turn. And of course, that's what I'd been taught in education courses. And I came to realize that it's fine if a parent wants to send their child to a school, private school, public school, Christian school, wherever, because God gave them the kids. It's their decision. But homeschooling is an excellent option. And I, after a number of years teaching at Greater Portland Christian School, I opened my own practice. At that point in Maine, homeschooling parents had to have a registered teacher in Maine work with them every so often. So I felt that it was important to do that, as well as I wanted to continue my limited counseling practice, which was with children and women and marriages. And then from there, a series of events. I co-founded one school, a K-12 school, and then after a number of years, I left that, and my husband and I co-founded Royal Academy, which is a kindergarten through grade 12 school. So we founded that in 1994, and then just prior to Dawn passing away in 2013, we passed on the reins to another couple, and I'm proud to say they hired me, so I was still working for them, and with that, all along the way, it involved a lot of travel, so which fit because I love to travel too.
And I saw some of your pictures this summer on Facebook,
Oh.
so I know you've enjoyed traveling.
I do.
Are you still engaged in that program of teaching?
I pretty much retired this May because I wanted to, and that's a good time to retire. I may be taking on a few students because what I've been doing is teaching virtually. You know, I'm talking live time over the internet with students, both individually and small groups of students, and everybody sees everybody else, so it's a very dynamic way to teach. But I may be doing some individual students, but it's virtual. Well, I've done some tutoring down here too, where the kids have come to the house, so there's always that possibility. But I do prefer to work with small groups as opposed to a group of 20 or 30 kids all at once. That's my preference because I like to design the program for the students. I like to write courses. So.
Well, I attended the workshop you did for Village Voices, and I think you like to teach as well and help other
I
people
do.
lead their creativity. And I got my story finished.
Oh, good. I'm working on one.
Tell us about what your other special interests are.
Oh, I have a lot. I love to read. I love to talk with folks about the Bible and God's Word as it applies to today, but also the history of the Bible. I love to listen to music. Golly.
You still like to be outdoors?
I still like to be outdoors. Right now is not too nice down here, but once it cools down a little, I plan to get back out. I've got 2 new gardens, and I'm starting on a 3rd one at my house. And I have been, since I came down here, I was encouraged to kayak. So I have started kayaking down here, and that's been a ball. I've enjoyed that. I've just starting to learn how to ride a horse. So that's been interesting. That was sort of on my bucket list, but basically it was to be able to get on a horse and not be scared because you're up so high. And I found out it's not really that high.
Right.
So I'm enjoying that.
Good.
So.
How did you come to move to Advent Christian Village?
Golly, years ago, when we were at Highland Cliff Advent Christian Church up in Maine, of course the church supported the village, and we've known of people down here. So after Don died, he died in October 2013, we had just started a major building project at the house, and I wanted to finish, obviously, that building project. And then God led me to put the house on the market. It sold in 5 days. So I moved down here sooner than I was expecting. But I looked at the I think there are 3 Advent Christian villages, right? I looked at the other 2, and they were where there was snow. And so I thought, okay, it looks like Florida. So I flew down here. As I'm going as the plane is descending, a voice said, "Welcome home." And there was nobody talking around me. So I knew that this was the place where God wanted me. And I'm glad I came.
Well, we're glad that you've joined this community as well.
Thank you.
What's on your bucket list? Still, you had mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, to travel more.
Where in particular?
I want to go back to Scotland. I want to go back to England. I don't care about all of Great Britain, but those two areas. I would like to see the White Cliffs of Dover. I've always wanted to see them. I want to go to specific states. I want to see Wyoming, Montana, Iowa, and North Dakota. Only because I've heard, I want to go to North Dakota in the winter because I've heard it's really bad. So I want to see it for myself. Yes, I do. And I've been to a lot of other states, most of the states east of the Mississippi. Oh, I do want to travel the Mississippi River. That's been an interest. I would like to go back to New Mexico. I fell in love with that state and the people there. So I would like to visit that again as well.
What surprised you most about moving to Advent Christian Village?
I think how quickly you get to know people. I mean, obviously it's on one level because it takes time to really get to know people. But because we're all older, we know the time is short, so we better get to know them quicker. And a lot of folks are widows or widowers, and they understand what it's like. And they also understand what it means to have boxes and boxes of things. And they seem, overall, the folks here have a good sense of humor. You know, they realize that time is short, and whether it's the Lord's coming back or we're all getting older, time is getting short. So try not to take ourselves too seriously. So I would say those are the main things that attract me.
You mentioned that when we were talking earlier, how many people from Maine have moved here.
Oh, yes.
Would you want to go back and spend a winter in Maine?
You know, I thought I would, and it's not, I mean, let's face it, it was awful. The last year I was there, we had a lot of rain and ice and snow. So I've gone back when the snow has been on the ground, and I know why I'm here.
Okay, good.
So, no.
What advice would you give a young person today?
I think what I would say to young people is be willing to try, be adventurous. If you have a heart's desire, follow it. Listen to your elders, but you are going to need to grow up and do what it is that God wants you to do. Obviously, my wish would be that every young person would accept the Lord and then just follow what He tells them to do. Those would be the main things.
Shirley, thank you so much for coming and having this conversation today.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to you joining us for other episodes of Front Porch Conversations.